What's up, guys? It's Toad back with you. This is college football week 14 video, the final week of college football before championship week, which I guess I'll do a championship week specific video as well. And then maybe at that point transition over to doing college basketball Saturday, breakdowns on Friday nights. I don't know. I haven't decided yet what I want to do about that. College basketball has not been great so far this season. I went 1-1 in college basketball today. Easy outright win with Maine, and then Northern Iowa did not get there. Northern Iowa was winning by double digits early in the game, and I'm like, all right, this is looking like it's off to a good start, and then they just totally imploded. What can you do about that? I wound up going 2-3 today, and it looked like I was going to have a winning day with the New York Islanders. Middle of the day, they were up 4-2 in the third period, and then they blew the lead, lost in overtime. That's brutal, man. I think it was still the right play to make, plus 130, something, whatever, underdog there. What can you do? The team's got a 2-goal lead in the third period. It still winds up going into overtime. You pretty much know you had the right side if an underdog does that. And then, yeah, you can blast me for the Wisconsin play. I'm just shocked that Wisconsin was that much of a no-show on senior night at home with bowl eligibility on the line against a Minnesota team that really played their guts out last week and already had bowl eligibility. That's just insane to me. I don't know what's going on with that Wisconsin program, man, but I'll have to talk to my friend Andy about that because he's a Wisconsin dude. I'm sure he's not happy about that. I should have been busting his balls already, but I'd have to bust my own balls, and I already got my balls busted losing that game. So, and then I did win on what did I win on? Oh, yeah, San Jose State. They almost blew it. They were winning for pretty much the whole game, but they decided to basically throw the game away after they were winning 24-10 early in the third quarter. I'm in hockey mode right now, third quarter. And then they actually wound up falling behind by, I think, 4 points at one point in the fourth quarter. Like, oh, man, I thought they were going to blow that one. I was going to have a pretty bad day. My camera will not adjust. That's awesome. It's because of my TV over there flipping out. But San Jose State did get the final score in that game. They did win. So there is that. And I'm late to this show because I was watching the Georgia Tech-Georgia game. I couldn't stop watching it, man. That was just crazy. It almost wound up being a record number of overtimes. It went 8 overtimes. Georgia was able to win the game. Georgia had been losing 20-6, I think, in the game and came back, which I thought they would. I mean, Georgia, they're a slow starting team. Georgia Tech, kind of the opposite. So I had tweeted out, like, play Georgia Tech live in-game at the half. Just, like, play them to cover, play them to win, whatever. Like, it'll probably happen. And that did wind up happening, but it did take 8 overtimes to do so. And I believe the longest game ever was 9 overtimes with Northwestern and Illinois a few years ago. I don't know. It was some game during one of the COVID years. I don't like the new overtime rules, by the way. I liked it when the overtime was each team would get alternating possessions, but from the third overtime on, I think is what it was, you had to go for 2-point conversions whenever you got a touchdown. But now that's not how it works. Now, I think once it gets into the third overtime, it literally just becomes a 2-point conversion contest. You don't even have a possession. You just go for a 2-point conversion. I don't know. I don't like it. I don't think that it assesses your football skills well enough. What's up, Nate? What about Nebraska? Yeah, the live bets on Georgia. Yeah, like I said, I definitely agreed with that. Those are good calls. You cashed on Iowa. Yeah, well, Iowa, I think they pushed, right? They were losing 10-0 at halftime. They didn't even show up offensively, and then they won 13-10. So I almost played Iowa -3, but if I had done that, it would have pushed. So I'm like, I don't know. I'm not too mad about passing on that. Let's get into this college football slate, man, because there are a lot of scenarios when we get down to the final week here, and I did kind of a rapid fire thing this morning on the games that happened this morning, which maybe I'll do again here a little bit, and I'll just go down the slate. I'll talk about the big ranked matchups, talk about some of the other games where there are ranked teams and games that I guess have implications, at least the ones that I remember to talk about, and try to get through it rapid fire. So let's go. Fuck it. Michigan at Ohio State. I mean, I basically have to talk about this just because this is it's the big rivalry of college football, right? But in the current state of Michigan and Ohio State right now, I mean, Ohio State's what, a 20-something point favorite? They're actually down from 20.5 to 19.5. Oh, all right. 70% of the tickets, 63% of the cash. So Ohio State is actually public with more of the cash coming in on Michigan than the amount of tickets that are coming on Michigan. So take from that what you will. But I mean, public is still, they're going to be on Ohio State like this, in a situation like this. I mean, they know what they've seen out of Michigan and Ohio State this year. They know that Ohio State's one of the best teams in college football, and I think they're probably the best team in college football. Ohio State just destroyed Indiana, and that was a game that the public sentiment, they seem to think that Ohio State, like, it might actually be a competitive game. I said it wasn't going to be, and early on, I think Indiana was winning that game, but Ohio State turned it on and just blew them out of the building eventually. It was 31-7 in the fourth quarter at one point, so easy blowout win for Ohio State. It was a big win, but of course, Ohio State, I mean, they're looking for top seeding in the playoffs. They're looking to get into the Big Ten championship right now, so they still need to win these games, so they can't really afford to take their foot off the gas, and I don't think they're going to against Michigan either. I mean, this is still a huge rivalry. As much as Michigan, yeah, they will show up and like try to do something in this game, but I just think it might be too much of a mismatch. I would not want to take the points with Michigan here. Michigan, I mean, they caught me last week. I thought that was a bad spot for them, and they just annihilated Northwestern, and they got bowl eligibility out of it, which I guess bowl eligibility meant more to them than I thought it would. I thought they wouldn't care about it as much, being a Michigan team that is the national title contender, or not a national title contender, but the returning national champs, I should say. I didn't think it meant that much to them to get into another bowl game, like some garbage bowl, but I guess it did, because that's what they did. They blew out Northwestern, and they probably know they're not going to win against Ohio State, but they're going to show up and try. And I guess at the very least, you can say that Michigan, their defense is decent. Like, will it be able to allow them to hang in a game against Ohio State? I'm not really sure. I mean, the market does look like it is indicating on the Michigan side, but you're not going to find me trying to make a play on that one. No, thank you. I'm not going to do it. Doc, what's up, man? Yeah, the slump is continuing. I'm on a 2-day slump now, but at least I'm only like slightly below 500 each of those days, right? 5 first downs. Nebraska choked Dick. I don't know. I didn't see it. I didn't see what happened. Oh, Iowa had 5 first downs in the entire game. That's what you meant? Man, Iowa's offense, they're pretty bad. They were worse last year, but man, that's crazy. I just thought the spot was good for Iowa. But Nate, you can celebrate because Nebraska has made a bowl for the first time since like 2016. They're in a bowl. That was my handicap. They're already in a bowl, so I was like, they don't need to win against Iowa. But at the very least, Iowa's defense is quite good. Tennessee at Vandy. Here's another one of your big rivalries here with Tennessee and Vandy. But Tennessee, they're also in a situation where they cannot afford to lose. Like, they do not want to fall into the ranks of the 3-loss teams, because if they do, you're probably looking at a situation where Alabama might actually like jump up ahead of them as far as the playoff standings are concerned. So Tennessee does not want to let that happen, and they still could get into the SEC title game as well, I think. I'm not sure, though, because Georgia won tonight, and then Texas, I don't know what would happen if Texas loses tomorrow. I'm not sure what the tiebreaker scenarios are there, so I don't know if Tennessee can actually still get into the SEC title game or not. The SEC title game is the one that's the most confusing to me. I don't really know the entire scenario, but either way, Tennessee, they still need to win because they're looking to get into the playoffs still, so they can't afford to ease up on the gas here either. Vandy, I mean, they're coming off a couple losses in a row after they got bowl eligibility. I thought they were playing above their pay grade, as I said, and they're coming off another pretty difficult game. They went into Death Valley, and they played to within 7 against LSU, so I'm not entirely sure Vandy is going to be in the greatest spot here, but it is senior night, and they are hosting their biggest rival in Tennessee, so they are going to show up for this. It's just a matter of, are they going to get overwhelmed by Tennessee? Tennessee, however, is down from 12.5 to 10.5 50% of the tickets evenly split, and 77% of the cash on Vandy. So the market is indicating pretty heavily on the Vandy side. So, gun to my head, I guess I would take that as a pretty strong indicator and lean with the market when I don't really have a great situational angle for you in that one. But I'm not going to do it. Tennessee, their offense really actually has not been that good in SEC play, though. This offense looked like it was great to start the season, but once they started facing SEC defenses, it has not been as good. Vandy, is not the best SEC defense, but they are still one of them. So it is possible that Vandy puts in a nice effort there still and does come within that number. The Battle of South Carolina, Clemson. So this is an out-of-conference matchup here. This is SEC versus ACC. And this is another one where I think both teams are going to be motivated here. South Carolina, I'm pretty sure they cannot make the SEC championship. They probably know they're not going to make the playoff either. But this is a huge rivalry game, so what better motivator is there than you get to play spoiler against your hated rival, your bigger brother in the state of South Carolina? They potentially could spoil Clemson's hopes of getting into the playoffs here. So South Carolina may be motivated for that reason. South Carolina's on a nice win streak, and they had an easy win over Wofford, in-state little brother Wofford last week, coming into this game against Clemson. But I think Clemson had a similar, almost bye week last week against the Citadel. Yeah, they did. So both teams are going to be pretty well rested coming into this one. This is number 15 against number 12, South Carolina and Clemson here. Clemson, like I said, they know what they're playing for here. They're trying to get into the ACC championship game. And, of course, if they win the ACC, they're going to get into the playoff with 2 losses. Again, if Clemson doesn't win the ACC, they're going to wind up with 3 losses. So will a 3-loss Clemson team be able to make the playoff? I'm not so sure, actually, because the ACC has been fairly weak. So I don't know about that. Right now they're ranked right on the cusp there, 12. So to me, it seems like Clemson has to keep winning. So if they win this game, it will certainly help them, obviously. And they need to win it for not only the playoff standings, but also for getting into the ACC championship game. So Clemson obviously has to show up here. South Carolina will show up to play spoiler. They're already in a bowl game themselves, but spoiler, like I said, is probably a motivator. Clemson's down from 3 with juice to 2.5 with juice. So this is an interesting line. Remember, the odds makers are actually telling you that South Carolina may actually be the better of these two teams slightly, because Clemson's not even getting full home field, and maybe that's true because South Carolina, the SEC is a gauntlet, man, so maybe South Carolina is actually slightly better than Clemson. South Carolina, surprisingly public. I would expect the public to be more on the Clemson side here. South Carolina's got 68% of the tickets, though, but 71% of the cash, and the line has moved down on Clemson, so it does look like the market read would say that the money is coming in on the South Carolina side in that one. So, I guess take from that what you will. So as far as the side, maybe I would slightly lean to South Carolina. This game, to me, it sort of looks like it has the makings of an under. A lot of these types of games may have the makings of an under just because you have, two teams. It's going to wind up being a heavyweight fight, and if both teams are going to show up and play defense, but especially in this case because both of these teams had such an easy game last week against a cupcake. So that means you're going to get 2 rested defenses coming into this one. So this one, out of all the games I've talked about here so far, and maybe out of all these games, I don't really do totals, but this one looks like more of an under type of play than the rest of them to me. Totals at 49, which is also indicating something because that's pretty low. 83% of the tickets and 91% of the cash, both on the over, but a low total like that is almost begging you to take the over, man, because it looks so easy for that game to go over. But South Carolina, they got a really good defense that I still think is underrated. And Clemson, they're not bad defensively either, so that's the way I would look in that game. What else we got here? I don't want to talk about every single one of these games, but, Louisville, Kentucky, this is a big rivalry game, but what can you say about this? Kentucky can't make a bowl anymore, so the best they can do is show up for a rivalry game, basically, because they don't really have anything to spoil for Louisville either, because Louisville, they're already in a bowl, and they're not making the ACC title game or anything like that. So Not much to say about that game, really. It's just that is one of the big rivalry games, though. So I don't know. What else can you say about that? Louisville's up from 3 to 4, 57% of tickets, 67% of the cash. So odds makers telling you Louisville is the better team there. But crazy things can happen in games like this, games where they don't matter as much to either team necessarily. Maybe one team will be a little bit more motivated than the other team will be, and it's kind of hard to gauge in a situation like this which team that might be. Maybe it would be Kentucky in this one, just because Kentucky, the thing about it is that Louisville is going to a bowl of some kind, and Kentucky knows that they're not. So that's kind of the side that I look to in this final game, like especially when it's at Kentucky, which I think it is. It's not a neutral site, right? Yeah, it's at Lexington, Kentucky. So Kentucky, because they're not going to a bowl in a situation like that, I think Kentucky's going to treat this like their bowl game, and Louisville is at least going to go to some bowl. But Kentucky, they know this is the last game they're going to be playing this year, so they might have a little bit extra motivation for that reason. So I would not want to play on Louisville in that one. Whew. All right, Kansas Baylor is kind of interesting because Kansas, I mean, they're coming off a stretch of big games, man. I mean, they've faced 4 ranked teams in a row and played up in every single one of those games, barely losing to their big rival, Kansas State. Then they pulled off wins against Iowa State, BYU, and Colorado, 3 straight upsets. Although the BYU and Colorado ones were both kind of mild upsets, but Kansas was a team that looked like they were completely dead. And even I was saying, man, this Kansas team is actually not good. But now I'm thinking maybe they are actually good, and they just, for whatever reason, struggled early in the season. They haven't really faced the easiest schedule either, but now, after they were, whatever they were, what were they, 2 and, I think they were 2-6, right? Yeah, and now they're 5-6. So now it looked like bowl eligibility was not going to be even a remote possibility, and now if they win this last game, they're going to be bowl eligible. So I think they're going to be motivated for this one, man, even though I know they're coming off a bunch of huge games in a row. So that's why I don't want to actually do it, just because the problem is, like, at some point, how can you keep putting in effort, like, game after game like this, week after week? You put in an effort, like, every week like this. Although I think they did have a bye after the Kansas State game, but still, that's, even if you have that bye there, that's still after that 3 straight huge games in a row, step-up games. So are they going to run out of gas finally? I don't know, having to go into Waco. But Baylor, I mean, Baylor doesn't really have much to play for in this game. I mean, they're sitting at 7-4. They're already in a bowl. I don't think they can make the Big 12 championship. I mean, they would, if that were to happen, I think they would need every one of these teams to lose that's ahead of them. And even then, I don't know if they would have the tiebreaker. So I'm guessing they don't have a chance to make the Big 12 title game here. So the only thing they have to play for here is Senior Day. So Kansas does actually have more of a reason to show up here, because they could actually get bowl eligibility after it looked completely impossible. And I think that would mean something to Kansas, even though they've started getting back into bowls again, and they finally won one, I believe, last year against UNLV. But I think that does matter to them, getting into a bowl. So I would look to play Kansas or pass this game. Kansas has flipped from 1.5 as an underdog to 1.5 as a favorite, but they are public because of the way they've been playing recently. 77% of the tickets, 67% of the cash. So I don't really like that cash discrepancy there. So I'm going to pass the game for all the reasons I just said. Like, there just aren't quite enough reasons to want to actually play Kansas here. And I can see them maybe just being completely out of steam at this point. But still, I guess I would slightly lean that way. But Baylor really has kind of been flying under the radar. I mean, they've won a bunch of games in a row too. But granted, they were against way weaker teams than what Kansas just did. I mean, Kansas just beat a bunch of much better teams than what Baylor has during this stretch. So Baylor has faced a weaker schedule than Kansas has. So I think that's for sure. And common opponent, Baylor did lose to both of these two teams that Kansas beat in Colorado, BYU, and Iowa State, actually, all 3 of them. But that might mean the public might look at that and think, oh, well, Kansas beat all those teams that beat Baylor, so that means that we should take Kansas here, right? So maybe that's why the public is coming in on Kansas, but also because Kansas's recent victories have just been very public because they've knocked off these, like, hyped teams, these big teams. So I don't really know what to do with that game, but slightly into Kansas. But obviously, like I said, don't want to play it. David, what's up, man? You need to make $200 quick. Well, I don't do things as quickly on this show, but like if you want what my best play is of the week, I will tell you what it is when I get to it, I guess. I mean, I have 5 plays and I'm gonna throw out there, and hopefully I get this done in not too much time. Your crack dealer is gonna come at you, cut your face off. Well, hopefully he's not coming at you tonight, at least. Hopefully we got a little bit of time here. First play up is going to be in this Louisiana against UL-Monroe game. I'm going to play UL-Monroe plus 10 in this one. I don't feel good about it, really. I don't know. I'm almost about to ask you to like kill me for playing this one, but I think that the situation I think is correct for this. Oh man, I'm wondering like how. Man, I hate that because they're called Louisiana now, but pregame saw them listed as Louisiana Lafayette, which is what they were back in the day. Louisiana Lafayette, they're down from 10 to 9.5 now. I still saw 10s out there like a little while ago, though, so I think you could still get 10 on this, which I would try if you can because that's kind of a key number in football. 66% of the tickets on Louisiana, of course, they're going to be public. I mean, they're one of the best offenses in the Sun Belt, if not the best, and they probably have the best quarterback in the Sun Belt. But I'll explain why I'm fading them in a second. 53% of the ticket of cash, on UL-Monroe. So the market read looks like the money is coming in, driving the line down towards UL-Monroe. Cash disparity looks like it's on the UL-Monroe side, going against where the public is. And you're taking about 10 points in a game with a total of 49.5. You know, I like to say that when it's a low total like that, taking the points means more, man. Each one of those points, because the points are going to be harder to come by, each one of those points means a little bit more. I like Louisiana Monroe on this for the motivational aspect of it, man. This is rivalry week, the final week of the season. You got to look and see what's the scenario here? What is the championship scenario here for these, especially in these smaller conferences? Well, here's what's going on here. In the Sun Belt, Louisiana, they're sitting atop the West right now, and here's the deal. Texas State was the only other team, or excuse me, not Texas State. South Alabama was the only team in the West that had a chance to overtake Louisiana, and they had to win their game today, and they needed Louisiana to lose against UL-Monroe, and South Alabama played today, and they lost to Texas State. So South Alabama is eliminated from potentially winning the Sun Belt West. Arkansas State, as you can see here, is sitting one game behind Louisiana, but that doesn't matter because Louisiana beat Arkansas State heads up 55-19 too. So Louisiana has the tiebreaker against Arkansas State. So if Louisiana loses this game, it doesn't even matter. If they lose and Arkansas State wins tomorrow, it doesn't even matter. Louisiana would still have the tiebreaker and still win the Sun Belt West. So they have clinched the Sun Belt West with South Alabama losing to Texas State today. So that means Louisiana has nothing to play for here, except that I guess they might still be playing for home field, like for hosting the Sun Belt Championship, but I don't know if that's going to be that big of a motivator. They are in the Sun Belt Championship, man. And it's going to be up against either Marshall or Georgia Southern. We don't know how that's going to play out yet. And I guess I'll talk about those games when I get to them. But Louisiana, yeah, they have little to play for because they're already in the Sun Belt Championship now with that South Alabama loss. So I think they know that, and they can start taking it easy. Whereas UL-Monroe, look at what they've done, man. They won 5 of their first 6 games, only losing to Texas. But granted, I pointed out that they're way overperforming against UAB, Troy, James Madison. They pulled off upsets in all 3 of those games and probably shouldn't have won any of them. Maybe, I guess the UAB one was a game that they should have won, but it should not have been a blowout like this at the very least. They were +3 in turnovers in that one. So, yeah, UL-Monroe was playing way above their pay grade there. But then they started losing a bunch of games. But are any of these losses really that bad that they had here? They lost to South Alabama, who, like I said, was in contention in the Sun Belt West. Marshall, who's sitting atop the Sun Belt East. Texas State, who was kind of like in the thick of it there in the West as well. Not a bad team. Auburn on the road, an SEC team. And South Alabama, Marshall were on the road too. Auburn, come on. SEC team, you expect them to beat Auburn? I don't think so. And then Arkansas State, who, like I said, are right there sitting second in the Sun Belt West. And all of those games except the Texas State one were on the road. So those games were not easy for UL-Monroe, man. None of those games in that stretch were easy games. Now, I know Louisiana's not an easy opponent to face either, but when Louisiana doesn't have that much to play for, they're already in the Sun Belt title game, and UL-Monroe is having their senior night, and they haven't won since way back here against Southern Miss, which was on October 12th. They haven't won since then, and all they've had to do this entire time is win one game to become bowl eligible, and it hasn't happened yet. And I think it would mean a lot for UL-Monroe to get into a bowl, man, because I don't think they've been in a bowl for a long-ass time. I mean, I could try to go back and look, but I don't think they've been in a bowl. I don't remember them ever being in a bowl, to be honest. So this would be like a huge deal for them to get into a bowl. This is their final home game. It may be the final game that they play at all. I mean, I could go back and see like when's the last time they played in a bowl, but I don't even know if I'm going to find it. So I think UL-Monroe does have a lot of motivation for that reason here. So give me UL-Monroe. We don't even need them to win the game, man. And they should be the team that has way more motivation in this game. They're at home. They're getting a ton of points. So they don't even need to win to cover this number. So give me the plus 10 on UL-Monroe for all those reasons. That's the first play that I got here. We got a lot of situations lining up here, man, in this week's slate here. And how many games have I already played this week? I don't even know. How many college football games have I had play on so far this week? I think I had 2 today, and I went 1-1. I don't know if I had any others during the week. Maybe I didn't. I don't know. You're betting your firstborn son's life on Kentucky. Dustin, don't blame me if you do that, because I'm not even playing that game. It's not a strong one for me. If you're going to bet it, I would recommend you bet something that you can afford. So not your firstborn son. Let me see. Maybe one of your other sons, though, if you don't like them as much. The next game up here is another one of my plays, and this is actually one that I like more, although I don't know if the line is still there on this one. But I'm going to be on UTSA plus 7, although it looks like it's mostly 6.5s out there now. But, I mean, I still kind of like it at the 6.5. Texas San Antonio, this is a good situational setup here as well. This is a fade of Army, and I know it looks dangerous to fade Army, but Army's down from 6.5 with juice to 6.5. Like I said, there might still be 7s out there, and if it's sitting at 6.5 right now, I mean, you could wait and just see if you can find a 7 cropping up tomorrow, because I think the public is going to at least slightly be on the Army side. They're at 54% of the tickets right now, but 59% of the cash is on UTSA, so it looks like the money is moving in that direction. It looks like there's probably not going to be a huge influx of like public action on this specific game, so you might not get the 7 anymore. I mean, maybe you want to find other creative ways to play this, but I wouldn't mind taking the 6.5 on UTSA either, though. I mean, even at 6.5, it's almost like the odds makers are begging you to lay the points with Army in this one, and I don't like it. I'm going to talk about that right now. Army, I mean, yeah, they're 9-1. They have a way better record. They're undefeated in the American Conference here. So why do I want to do this? And UTSA is just sitting at 4-3, and they're already bowl eligible, so they don't have that much to play for. Yeah, I realize that. This is Army's final home game. I also realize that. But here's the problem. Army's coming off like their biggest game of the year against Notre Dame. They had not played a single step-up game all year, and honestly, I don't even think they were below a touchdown favorite in any of these other games. So UTSA, I think, is actually the second best team that they're facing besides Notre Dame all season, which is crazy to think about because UTSA is obviously nowhere near as good as Notre Dame, but that's how weak Army's schedule has been. They haven't faced anybody better than UTSA. North Texas, possibly, I guess. North Texas, maybe even not. I mean, North Texas, they're sitting below UTSA in the standings, so maybe not. I mean, besides Notre Dame, I think North Texas was their best opponent they'd faced up until Notre Dame. So Army, I mean, they faced one of the weakest schedules in all of FBS up until that Notre Dame game, and they got blasted by Notre Dame. I said that was going to happen, and you know what that reminded me of? As I mentioned last week, that reminded me of the Navy game against Notre Dame. Navy stepping up in class, and what happened? Navy completely spiraled after they lost that first game of the season. When you're rolling along like that and you face a tough physical team like Notre Dame and they just beat your ass, what happened to Navy? They completely spiraled, and they lost, like, I think at least 2 or 3 more games in a row after that. They just completely fell off, and they lost to some not even good teams either. So I could see the same thing happening to Army here, man. even though this is their final home game. I think that was their big game against Notre Dame. But not only that, but this is also a sandwich spot because they're coming off that huge game against Notre Dame, even though, yeah, they got blown out. I don't see this as a bounce back spot. When you're undefeated and you're not used to losing and you take that first loss, I think it sends you spiraling. But what does Army have up next? Yeah, I know it says they have the Army-Navy game on December 14th, and they do. That's a big rivalry game, so they do have that game coming up. But what do they have up next week, though, which is not shown on the schedule here yet? Yeah, they're in the American Conference Championship. They're already in. So it's going to be Army. I think at this point it is actually determined that it's Army and Tulane. I think it must be, yeah, because I mentioned that yesterday, right? Tulane was already in the championship game as well, and Tulane lost last night. So Army, I believe, already had the tiebreaker against Tulane because they have the better overall record. They didn't face each other head-to-head, so with Tulane losing to Memphis last night, that means Army is going to host the American Championship, I believe. I don't think it's in a neutral site game, so Army really has nothing to play for here, man. They know they're going to be facing Tulane, I believe, at home now in the American Conference Championship, so they have no reason to show up for this game. And then the other aspect of this is that you might think, well, wait a minute, but UTSA, they have to face a triple option attack here in Army, right? So isn't that dangerous to play UTSA? Well, UTSA being in this conference, they wind up having to face triple option attacks sometimes, like during the year. I know they haven't faced any this year. They haven't faced Navy this year, but they're used to it because they have faced, I know that they faced at least one of these teams last year. I think they beat Army last year. They beat Navy last year towards the end of the season, and they beat Army, I thought. Or no, I'm looking at Army. Never mind. Sorry. Army actually beat UTSA. My apologies there. So Army actually won at UTSA last year. So I think I won money on that one. Or it was a game that I almost played. I forget what it was, but I wanted the underdog in that one, whichever way it was. And I think it was Army was the underdog in that one. They went into UTSA and upset them. So now UTSA has the chance to return the favor, man. So UTSA, I wanted to look at their schedule from last year. Excuse me. Let me see here. Yeah, so UTSA, they had that game against Army. They didn't play any of the other triple option attacks, but they do play the triple options sometimes. And I know UTSA doesn't have, I don't think they have Harris anymore, their star quarterback from last year. But even, I think he was out for that bowl game too. But even so, UTSA, I mean, their defense still knows how to face triple options a little bit, especially because they have triple option attacks in their conference. They played against Army last year, and yeah, they lost. So I think that might give them a little bit of a revenge motive as well, because they lost at home against Army last year. Now they get to go to Army and return the favor on their senior night and spoil their senior day. And UTSA actually has a good run defense, so their strength is their run defense, and Army only runs the ball. So I know that Army is a good rushing attack. They're a triple option attack, so it's not like they're going to get no yards on the ground, but still UTSA with their good run defense should be able to match up against Army's strength and slow them down enough to at least cover as an underdog here, if not actually win the game outright. So give me Texas, San Antonio, UTSA in that one, +7 or +6.5. I do like that one quite a bit. Again, I think Army just really does not have a whole lot of motivation not to show up in that game. Let's see. What do we got coming up on the schedule? Eastern Michigan and Western Michigan, by the way, is just interesting because both teams are sitting at 5 wins now. So whoever wins that game gets a bowl, and whoever doesn't goes home. Western Michigan is the favorite, somewhere around 6.5 at home. Excuse me. So just kind of interesting there. North Texas, by the way, they're still sitting at 5 wins, and they've lost 5 games in a row to somewhat difficult competition here against Memphis on the road. Tulane is really good. That was a game where I played Tulane. I think Tulane was actually blowing them out, so Tulane should have won by more than they did. They still covered for me. And then Army, not easy either. UTSA, like I said, they're not that bad either. And then East Carolina, I mean, they're not great, but they're not horrible either. So North Texas has not really had an easy time of it, and now North Texas gets a pretty weak Temple team. It is on Temple senior night, so Temple does have the chance to spoil North Texas, like from getting a bowl, but does Temple really care that much about that? I don't even know. I don't really think so. I mean, North Texas is the better team. Temple is really bad. So I would expect North Texas to be able to win this game and get their bowl eligibility, but we'll see. North Texas. They're up from 10 to 11, so they should win the game, but they are public with 71% of the tickets and 59% of the cash on them. But it does look like the line has moved on North Texas there, so that's a game of interest. Coastal Carolina is also sitting at 5 wins, so they can become bowl eligible, and they've only won 1 game since way back. They won their first 3 games of the season, not against very difficult opponents, though. And since they've stepped up and faced more difficult opponents, they've lost all the games. So they have faced like the best teams in the Sun Belt, having to face Old Dominion, which they won, James Madison, Louisiana. Troy isn't that good, but App State's not horrible. Marshall is good. Georgia Southern is good. So now Coastal is actually stepping down in class for this final game against maybe the weakest team in the entire conference besides Southern Miss. Georgia State, the second weakest team in the conference. So Coastal, they could get their bowl eligibility here. And I know the 5-win teams probably don't want these guys to get these bowl bids, because if there aren't enough teams to fill the bowls, then the 5-win teams and whatever get to petition to try to get into the bowls, or the teams that are in like transition period, like Jacksonville State and James Madison were last year, get to petition to get into. Georgia State's actually favored in this game, but they're down from 2 to 1, 78% of tickets, 88% of the cash on Coastal. So the public is going to come in on Coastal. I mean, that just looks crazy that Georgia State's the favorite, which I would normally say that's a suspect line. Like, how could the team that's the worst team even be a favorite here, even though I know it's because they're at home? But in this case, Coastal, I mean, because they're still playing for bowl eligibility at the very least, have a little bit more of the motivational factor there. So I think that might drive them in that game. South Florida, they just became bowl eligible to get their 6th win, and they put 63 points on the board against Tulsa and 59 the week before that against Charlotte. So I think they might just not really care at this point. They got their bowl eligibility. They're going to Rice on their senior night, and they got blown out by UAB in their last game. It looks like maybe a spot to take Rice if you're going to play that one. I am not going to, but South Florida's up from 4 to 5.5, though, with 59% of the cash, 55% of the tickets. So I don't know what to think about that. And I didn't look at the line on the Western Michigan one, but it looks like Western Michigan's actually an anti-public home favorite, which is crazy. I'd expect Western Michigan to be public, man, with the way their offense plays. I don't know, 84% of the tickets and 82% of the cash, taking the points with Eastern Michigan in that one. Yeah, doesn't look good for Eastern Michigan in that one. Western Michigan is still the better team, even though I make fun of their defense all the time. Their offense is still pretty talented. So I don't know what else to say about any of these. I'm just trying to hit like a lot of these games that have bowl implications. I mean, Penn State's facing Maryland. Penn State still has to show up here because they're in the playoff hunt, and they could potentially get into the Big Ten title game, I guess. I mean, it's not likely because Ohio State's going to win, but Penn State, and this game is going to be played after Ohio State's game is decided, I think, anyway. But Penn State, they're still playing to get into the playoff. Like, they still need to win, so they can't really take their foot off the gas, but they are laying a ton of points, up from 24 to 24.5, 76% of the tickets, 70% of the cash on them, so they are public. So, I mean, I'm not going to get involved and play this game, but just pointing it out. In Maryland, they cannot make a bowl at this point because they have 7 losses. Notre Dame, USC is another big rivalry game here. This is the battle for the Golden Shillelagh, I believe. I don't know why exactly. Is USC also like an Irish Catholic school or something? I don't know. I think it's the battle for the Golden Shillelagh because I know Notre Dame and BC have like a different like Irish Catholic battle, but I guess maybe that rivalry doesn't even exist anymore because they didn't play this year. I don't know. But Notre Dame, I mean, they're coming off crushing Army, of course, but Notre Dame, they still need to get into the playoff, and they really can't really afford another loss because their one loss is pretty bad. It's on Northern Illinois, so they can't really afford to take their foot off the gas. But they're having to go out to the Pacific Coast for the first time this year, man, so it doesn't look that easy going out to USC. And USC, I know they did win their rivalry last week against UCLA. USC clinched bowl eligibility with that as well, but I do think they're going to show up for this game because I think I mean, it's a big rivalry game, but it is Notre Dame coming into their house. And USC, I mean, they have a chance to spoil Notre Dame's season, so I don't see USC not showing up for this. It's just a matter of, is Notre Dame too good as far as they're concerned? Because Notre Dame is the significantly better team here. They're up from 6.5 to 7, 78% of the tickets, 84% of the cash. So the public's coming in on them, but it looks like the actual money is also on that side and agreeing with the public. But I'm not going to be laying points with Notre Dame in a weird, like, Pacific Coast game like that. And I don't want to say it's a totally unfamiliar environment because I think they do have to play there like every other year, but because it's that rivalry game, but I don't want to do it. Miami, I mean, they're another team that's in the playoff hunt, and they're still in the hunt to get into the ACC championship, so they can't afford to lose either right now. They're going to Syracuse, to the Carrier Dome here. Syracuse is already at a bowl. They got 8 wins. They're coming off a kind of lackluster game against UConn, where I played UConn in that game. UConn covered for me. So Syracuse should show up. I mean, it's senior day. They have a chance to spoil Miami's season, but Miami, like I said, they also can't take their foot off the gas. Miami's up from 10 to 11. This looks like a very high total. I don't know. 56% of the tickets, 62% of the cash on Syracuse. So it does look like more of the cash is coming in on Syracuse, but it looks like Syracuse might actually kind of be a slightly public underdog in some ways. So it's really hard to gauge that one. I would not want to try my hand at taking the points with Syracuse in this one, though, with Miami needing that playoff seeding and wanting to get into the ACC title game. The total, crazy high, but it's down from 68.5 to 67.5. Juice to the over, 88% of the cash, or 88% of the tickets, 81% of the cash on the over. This is one of those ones where, because it's McCord for Syracuse against Cam Ward, McCord against Ward, the QB battle there, that's going to be one of the more like enticing games for the public to come in and play an over in this one. So I'm not totally sure I would agree with that, but I mean, it seems kind of dangerous to play an under there too, because both of those offenses can score, but Syracuse at the very least I think is kind of a one-dimensional offense. They can't really run the ball, so it's going to come down to, is McCord like mistake-free, because he's made a lot of mistakes this year too. Like, is he able to actually throw the ball in this game? That's really the major question, as far as, is Syracuse going to do well in this game at all, and could it potentially go over? So I don't want to get involved in it. Let's take a look at some of these comments here. What's up, Nate? I don't know. I mean, they're definitely like, they're just plugged into some like APIs. Like, they're probably just connected to different. Or do you mean like which books are they getting the data from? They have a lot of books that are in here, but a lot of them are like the old school offshore books and the like Vegas books. I don't know if they started including the new guys like DraftKings, FanDuel, whatever, because this site existed way before those things became big. So this site was always like like I liked it because it was like the sharp books were getting included, like Pinnacle, Five Dimes, Bookmaker, like all those offshore online sites. Also Bovada, but they're more of a Square online shop. They get included here, and then like the actual like Vegas casinos are getting included in here. So I think they got like Stations, Caesars, but it might be Caesars Online now too. I don't know. They got MGM in here, but it might be MGM Online now too, because MGM was Vegas. I mean, there is still an MGM in Vegas. I know they have like Stations, the Westgate in here, like a bunch of the. They got William Hill. I'm pretty sure like the in-person like Vegas books are all in here. Action Network, which you sometimes see, I have my Action Network tab up. They actually are more, their numbers are heavily from like DraftKings, FanDuel, and stuff like that, and their numbers are like way different than the numbers that I see here. So I think the numbers that you're seeing on Action Network are actually more Square numbers, and I always got more from this view here. So I like this. This is a more limited view to like the books that I actually care about more, essentially. Where I think those like big online books actually skew the numbers, even though, so Action Network is showing you a larger amount of bets, but I don't know, the view the view that they have fucks me up, although sometimes I do like to make sure that both of my bets are kind of in alignment on both of those. But I don't like Action Network more. And this view is free on pregame. I don't know why they have always had it free, but it is. It's a nice free tool. And I like Don Best as well, but it costs a ton of money. Action Network is not as expensive. I do pay for Action Network, but it's good as like a bet tracking tool. And it like automatically interfaces with a bunch of books. So you can just make your bet like through that. But I don't like Action Network's like market percentage numbers as much as I like the ones on this site. Nice. Yeah, I mean, hockey. For some reason, hockey has been really good to me this year, too. All right, what else? What else am I going to talk about here? We've got a lot of games on this. Not that many left. Alabama, Auburn. I mean, this is a game. My first instinct here was we got to fade Alabama, right? After they lost to Oklahoma, I'm like, that's a dream crusher, right? Alabama, they're in the dream crusher. They can't make the playoff now. I'm looking at it, and I'm like, I don't know, man. They're ranked 13, even though I know these are not the playoff rankings. These are the college football rankings or whatever. I think Alabama's not actually completely dead here. I think that if some of these teams, like if Tennessee were to lose, or maybe even like Texas A&M, like if one of these teams were to lose, and maybe some of these teams in other conferences, I think there are a couple of situations where if a certain team loses, maybe even like Clemson or something like that, Alabama, I think they're still live to get into the playoff because they are Alabama. It's an expanded playoff field. So I actually don't think Alabama is quite in the dream crusher here because my first instinct was I automatically want to fade Alabama after they get that third loss. But I just don't. I don't think they're done. And if you look at the playoff odds, you can see the odds on a bunch of teams to make the playoffs. Alabama is plus 180 to still make the playoffs, so they're not a huge underdog. Like some of these other teams, like Army, they drop completely out of the rankings. Army is like plus 5,000 or something to make the playoffs. It's not going to happen. But Alabama, plus 180, I mean, that basically means that one team could lose and Alabama could get into the field. So Alabama is still live, so I'm not going to fade Alabama here, even though they are off of their third loss. So now I see it more as well. That was like a really ugly loss. I think they're going to show up in this game. They certainly can't afford to lose again. This is a big rivalry game, though. And on the other side, you got Auburn. They are playing for bowl eligibility still at the very least. And, of course, this is a huge game anyway. Auburn always steps it up against Alabama, man. And this is the huge, what is this, the Iron Bowl or whatever it is? It's a huge rivalry game. Auburn, though, I don't know if I would want to play Auburn anyway, though, because even if Alabama was in the Dream Crusher, I mean, maybe I would still do it, but Auburn, they're coming off. Look at this game they're coming off of. 4 overtime game against Texas A&M. That was a huge game for them. Big win. Really kind of threw a wrench into Texas A&M's season. That was a huge win for Auburn. Total, like, huge effort game that went 4 overtimes. So coming off of that, that would be a spot where normally you'd want to totally fade that team off of that, off of a game like that. But because they're playing Alabama, I mean, they're going to show up for this game. It's just a matter of, are they going to just run out of gas? Like, are they just going to be totally fatigued by the end of this? I don't know. So I don't want to do it on Auburn. It might still be the way that I lean, but Alabama's down from 13 to 10.5 now with juice. So maybe like 11 at some spots. 56% of the tickets, 57% of the cash. This is a hard read for me, man. Like, initially I thought Alabama Dream Crusher. I thought Auburn was going to be one of my big plays this week. It is not going to be a play for me. I'm just going to stay off of it. I'll stay away, but obviously it's a game I did have to talk about because it's a big matchup there for a whole bunch of reasons. And Auburn, like, they still might show up again because they're also playing for bowl eligibility, like I said. Arizona State and Arizona. Arizona State, I mean, they're playing to get into the Big 12 championship. They got to win. I think basically if they win, they're going to be in the Big 12 championship game, which is crazy. They are coming off a big win over BYU, though. A couple of big wins in a row over ranked opponents. Big upset over Kansas State on the road, and then win as a small favorite at home last week against BYU, who began spiraling a little bit off of their first loss of the season to Kansas. And BYU, they're pretty much eliminated now. So that was kind of a dream crusher, or maybe I don't know. Does that mean this week is the real dream crusher for BYU after they lost a second game? Maybe. But Arizona State, yeah, I mean, they need to win to get into the Big 12 championship. Arizona, they can't go anywhere, so they might treat this like their bowl game, though, man, because they are out. They're out of it, so they might show up just to try to spoil their biggest in-state rival season, man. So could be a tough game for Arizona State. Coming off a couple of big wins to come into this game. Arizona coming off another ugly loss. Arizona will likely, I think, treat this like their bowl game. So Arizona State's sitting at 8.5, 63% of the tickets, 68% of the cash. So they do look like they have more of the cash on them right now. Tough read, man. Again, a lot of these games where it looks like there are reasons why both teams are probably going to be motivated sets it up for a tough spot, man. Rutgers, Michigan State. I'm not going to talk about every single game on the board, but I'm talking about a whole lot of them. Michigan State -1.5 is my play in this one. I think this is a spot to do it, man. Rutgers, they got their 6th win 2 weeks ago, so they're bowl eligible. That's pretty big for them, even though I think they did win a bowl. I think I won on them last year in their bowl against Miami, right? I won on Rutgers. I think it was at Yankee Stadium, the Pinstripe Bowl. But still, I mean, Rutgers, they want to make a bowl. They did. And then, yeah, they had a worse game last week, but this is a tough game anyway, man. Against still a ranked Illinois team. This is still a game you step up for if you're Rutgers. This was Rutgers' senior night, and Illinois spoiled their senior night. And look at what happened in this game. Rutgers was, look at how back and forth this was, man. Rutgers was winning going into the fourth quarter, and then a ton of points were scored in the fourth quarter, especially a ton of points late. Rutgers was still winning until late in the game. They gave up the lead. They got the lead back, and then they gave it up again and then gave up a safety at the end too. So kind of a brutal game, brutal loss for Rutgers. And now with really not a whole lot to play for, they're going over to Michigan State. I don't think that looks that great from the Rutgers perspective, coming off that barn burner of a game. They're already bowl eligible. You know who's not bowl eligible, though? Michigan State. Michigan State sitting at 5-6. And like I said, this sets up for them to probably get bowl eligibility here because they had an easy game against Purdue last week. People might look at this and also think, well, wait a minute. Michigan State was horrible against Illinois, and Rutgers was good against Illinois. So doesn't that mean we should take Rutgers here too? I don't know. And that was a road game for Michigan State, and it was a home game for Rutgers. But Michigan State, this game against Purdue was bad, dude. I mean, they looked like ass in this game. I mean, they weren't winning by 14 going into the fourth quarter, so fine. But they got outgained in this game. Purdue turned it over a couple of times. So I think Michigan State knows they did not play well in that game. And now it just comes down to this. They have a home game. They're a small favorite. If they beat Rutgers, they're going to get bowl eligibility. And you might think, well, bowl eligibility, does that mean that much to Michigan State? Because they're like a big program, right? Well, if you look back at Michigan State, they have not been in a bowl since 2021, I believe is the case. So they have not been in a bowl for multiple years. So I think it does mean a lot to Michigan State for them to get back into a bowl. So I think they are going to show up for this game. Rutgers has less of a reason to show up. Michigan State is off of a game where they really didn't play well, so they're kind of in a bounce-back spot here in a way. And Rutgers is kind of in somewhat of a letdown spot in a way after that crazy game last week. So give me Michigan State in this one. They're up from 1-2 now, 69% of tickets and 64% of the cash, though. So I don't like that they're public. I don't really see how they're public, except that I guess because of their name alone, Michigan State, they have the bigger name, or maybe it is because they need to win to become bowl eligible. So it is kind of that must-win scenario, but you're not asking them to win by margin here. If it's a must-win and the pressure is going to be on them and you're asking them to win by some sort of margin, yeah, I don't like that. But when you're really just asking them to win the game, that's what they're motivated to do. So I'm going to do it. I'm going to be on Michigan State in this one, and hopefully it happens, and hopefully the market corrects a little bit here, because it does look like the line has moved up on Michigan State at least, even though it looks like the cash percentage is not on them. So we will see. UCLA, I will just point out, they're coming off that rivalry game where they played close against USC, and now they're coming off that, and they really don't have much to play for now. They can't become bowl eligible, so they might be in a bit of a letdown type of spot here. Fresno, I mean, they did just become bowl eligible, though, so they might be in kind of a letdown spot, too, going over to UCLA. but it is an in-state big brother for Fresno at the very least. So I would still kind of look to the Fresno side there. UCLA is down from 9.5 to 8. 63% of the tickets, 69% of the cash on Fresno. Even though it is going to be UCLA's last game and it is their senior day, so they might treat that as such, but it's not a big opponent for them. Like, it's not really an opponent that's going to hype them up. So really, that was last week's game, and they played USC. That was kind of their biggest game there. That was kind of their bowl game, if you will. NC State, North Carolina. NC State is still looking for their 6th win, so they might treat this as such. I mean, they're coming off that tough game where they almost pulled the upset against Georgia Tech, which I was on NC State in that one. I thought Georgia Tech was in a bad spot. Like, I think it was a sandwich spot. North Carolina, on the other hand, they're already bowl eligible, and they lost last week, though, going up to BC. I said that was a bad spot going up to BC. So, I mean, this is going to be their final home game, though. North Carolina, it is a rivalry, and they do have a chance to block NC State from being bowl eligible. So maybe North Carolina still has reason to show up here. They're down from 5 to 3 with 56% of the tickets, 78% of the cash on them. So another kind of difficult read there in a way. I don't just jump on like every team that needs one win to become bowl eligible. There's got to be like more to it than that, but I just figured I would talk about it. Next up is a play for me here. Western Kentucky. Oh, I still had Michigan State up there. Western Kentucky +1. This is the 4th. I have 5 plays, so I only have 1 more left, so we're getting close to the end here. I'm playing Western Kentucky against Jacksonville State. This is another one of those spots, man, where Jacksonville State, they're already in the Conference USA championship, and it's just a matter of who are they going to play. I think they've already clinched home field in the Conference USA championship as well. Liberty lost to Sam Houston today, so Liberty is now eliminated from possibly getting into the Conference USA championship game. Sam Houston is still alive, and Sam Houston would need Western Kentucky to lose this game. So this is all kind of coming together, man. So basically, Jacksonville State is already in. They're in the Conference USA championship game. Western Kentucky, the only way that they're going to get in, and obviously they want to get in, the only way they're going to get in is to win this game against Jacksonville State. So you have Jacksonville State who's already in, and Western Kentucky, it's you win and you're in. So which team is the more motivated team here? Yeah, I wonder. Western Kentucky, they're sitting at home. They're playing at home, excuse me. So it is their senior day, and they're coming off an ugly loss to Liberty. It was an ugly loss against Louisiana Tech. I don't know how you can explain that loss to Louisiana Tech. That was just a weird, bad loss, and maybe they were just looking ahead to these final 2 games. I don't know, because Liberty's not a bad team, so that loss wasn't that bad. So Western Kentucky, I think, is probably kind of in bounce-back mode as well after those 2 losses. Jacksonville State, they're coming off a win over Sam Houston, which is a win against one of the bigger teams in the conference. So they beat Sam Houston, so I wouldn't say they're in a letdown spot, but they are coming off a big game, and like I said, they don't need to win this game, so Western Kentucky does. So you have a situation like that. Only one team really has reason to show up motivated here. That's what I'm going to do. Give me Western Kentucky. And Western Kentucky, I would say, does have the better quarterback here as well. In Veltkamp, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the conference going up against Huff for Jacksonville State. Jacksonville State is better at running the ball, though. Western Kentucky mostly throws the ball. Jacksonville State is a more balanced attack. But again, like normally I may want to be on the more balanced attack, but the motivation says everything in this game, man. Western Kentucky got a win to get in. In Jacksonville State, it's a matter of, I guess it's a matter of, does Jacksonville State want to prevent Western Kentucky from getting in, which means that they would play Sam Houston State, who they already beat once. Sam Houston is a weaker opponent than Western Kentucky, so debatably, yes, I guess that would be the one motivational factor there, is that Jacksonville State would rather face Sam Houston than Western Kentucky, probably, in the championship game, but I don't think that motivation trumps the fact that they know they're already in, which is the most important thing, and that Western Kentucky needs to win to get in. So give me Western Kentucky in this one. And Western Kentucky is the team that has more experience being in scenarios like this, because Jacksonville State, they're new. They were new to FBS, I think last year or the year before that, and they petitioned to get into that bowl game last year. So Western Kentucky is the team that's more used to being in these like conference championship types of scenarios. Somehow the line has dropped. It's moved from Western Kentucky at -2 down to a pick 'em. I don't know how that's the case. I found them at +1. and they got 65% of the tickets and 67% of the cash. So I don't know. I mean, I don't really understand why the line movement looks like it's different than where the cash is coming in, but maybe the cash started coming in on Western Kentucky at the better number. I mean, I don't know if maybe it's just guys playing games with the market and trying to take both teams as an underdog, that type of thing. I don't know. I'm just going to where the situation leads me to, and that is Western Kentucky. So give me that one. Western Kentucky +1. And we're almost done here. TCU, Cincinnati. I mean, this is another one where Cincinnati are sitting at 5 wins, and they've lost 4 games in a row. They had 4 shots to get bowl eligibility, although Colorado, Iowa State, Kansas, Kansas State, all on the road. Those are not easy opponents. West Virginia, a little bit easier, and they lost that one too. Now they get TCU, who's not the strongest opponent. TCU is already in a bowl game. So it seems to be like Cincinnati will be the team that has the motivation here in this game against TCU. TCU coming off a blowout win over Arizona and over Oklahoma State. I don't think they've been that impressive, man. I mean, what impressive wins do they have here this year? I mean, Kansas is actually looking like their best win now. Maybe Texas Tech, but they faced a pretty weak Big 12 schedule, man. So TCU, I'm not that afraid of them. I still don't think their defense is that good. TCU already in a bowl, like I said, and Cincinnati still trying to get bowl eligibility after so many losses in a row. So I do lean to the Cincinnati side. The numbers up from TCU 1 to 3.5. 77% of the tickets, 51% of the cash. So the cash percentage looks like it's a lot less on TCU, and the TCU is public. So I like the Cincinnati side in that one. App State, Georgia Southern. This is an interesting one as well because App State, one more win, and they get 6 wins. And their season, was derailed a little bit because that one game against Liberty got canceled because of the hurricane that came through there, and they never got to replay it. So now they have one fewer chance to the bracket challenge. Yeah, they have one fewer chance to get bowl eligibility. So that's what they're playing for. But they're coming off a big win over James Madison. Now they're going out on the road. And this is tough for App State, man, because I know they want to get bowl eligibility. They've been in bowls a lot of recent years. But the problem is this is Georgia Southern's final home game, and Georgia Southern can still get into the Sun Belt championship game. So Georgia Southern is certainly going to be motivated here. I believe they need to win, and they need Marshall to lose. And then Georgia Southern would get in against Louisiana because Georgia Southern has the tiebreaker against Marshall because they beat Marshall. So Georgia Southern has to win and Marshall has to lose, and then Georgia Southern would be in. And there's a possibility that's going to happen because Marshall, their game is not easy either. So that's how that game sets up there. Both teams have reason to be motivated there. Georgia Southern sitting at 2.5, up to 2.5 with juice, but public with 70% of the tickets, 75% of the cash on the other side on App State. So the cash percentage seems to be indicating that bowl eligibility actually means more, or maybe that App State is being a little bit undervalued in the market here and that they're the somewhat better team, under the radar team. I don't know. Because I would think that Sun Belt championship berth is actually more of a motivator than a bowl berth, but maybe it's not. I don't know. Georgia Southern's already in some bowl, and what bowl are they going to get into if they win the Sun Belt? I don't know. It's not going to be that much of a better bowl, but still, winning the Sun Belt is still, I think it's a big deal. You get to say you were the conference champs, so that is still something on its own. So not a game I want to get involved in, but both teams have reason to show up. Wyoming is coming off a tough game where they were hanging with Boise State, man. I think this is Wyoming's senior night, too, and they were a 25.5-point underdog, and they were in this game the whole way. Boise obviously didn't even show up, and Boise almost lost the game, man. Boise was losing in the fourth quarter of that game and finally got a touchdown late to win it, so Wyoming was that close to beating Boise, and now they're coming off that, and they're having to face Washington State, but Washington State just dropped out of the rankings. So does that mean Washington State's going to be in a letdown spot? I don't know, because they just lost to Oregon State. That was a pretty big game for them. But this is going to be their senior day now, or senior night, I guess, and Wyoming's coming off basically their huge game because Wyoming's not going to a bowl. They're not going anywhere, but Washington State's already going to a bowl. So I don't know, but Wyoming, I think coming off that Boise State game, I just don't see them really showing up here, even though Washington State is a big-name opponent. Boise is a huge opponent. Washington State's up from 17 to 17.5. 86% of tickets, 79% of the cash. So Washington State looks like they are public with less of the cash on them, but I would probably only look to lay the points with Washington State in this one. I don't quite want to do it, but they are coming off. This loss against Oregon State was actually pretty bad. I mean, they were a double-digit favorite. So Washington State's coming off getting upset as a double-digit favorite. 10.5-point favorite. And Wyoming's coming off being a giant underdog and playing way out of their depth against really good Boise State team and almost being able to pull off that monumental upset off of them. So I would only look to play Washington State in that one, but I have not done it. I don't think I'm going to do it. I mean, Purdue and Indiana, I mean, this is the battle of Indiana, but Purdue is just so terrible. But Indiana, they lost their first game of the season finally, and I said that was going to happen. They came down to reality and lost badly to Ohio State, but Indiana, they're still not out of the playoffs. They're a one-loss Big Ten team. They're ranked 10 right now. They can still make the playoff field. They need to win against Purdue, obviously, so they do still have reason to show up in this game, and Purdue does suck. So the question is that Ohio State loss going to send Indiana spiraling a little bit? And I'm not so sure about that, and Purdue is just so bad that I don't even know if Purdue is going to be able to even do anything in this game. Second straight road game for Purdue after they hung with Michigan State, which at least is a fairly punishing defense there in Michigan State. Indiana's up from 27.5 to 29, 89% of the tickets, 75% of the cash. Man, I mean, I don't know what to think about that game either. Florida State. This is interesting as well. I mean, we're getting down to the end here, man. Finally, this is a game where Florida, they just became bowl eligible, and not only did they do that, but look at the teams that they faced recently. In the last several games, they've lost to Tennessee close. They beat Kentucky, which isn't that great. Lost to Georgia in that big rivalry game. They lost to Texas badly, but it's still Texas. Then they beat LSU, and that was a game I played Florida because LSU was in the major dream crusher spot in that one. And then Florida beat Ole Miss last week, beating LSU and Ole Miss, two ranked teams at home, and that was their senior day. And that's how they became bowl eligible. That is a huge win for Florida, and Florida becoming bowl eligible is a huge deal, man, because Florida, they didn't make a bowl last year, and they haven't won a bowl. I went back and looked. The last time they won a bowl was 2019. So I think it's a big deal for Florida, man. They missed out on a bowl completely last year. They're used to getting into bowls, and they haven't won one in several years. So, or almost several, 5 years, I guess. But that's a big win for Florida, man. A couple of big wins in a row. So I think they're in a letdown spot here. In Florida State, they're in a position right now where they're playing little brother again. I mean, they've had such a bad season. They finally won a game against an FCS team, Charleston Southern, but they get a win, so they get to break this like losing momentum at the very least. So I kind of want to say I would lean to Florida State here. Because, I mean, Florida, that was a meaningful game, man. Meaningful win. A couple of meaningful games in a row. And Florida State, they have nothing else left, man. So if Florida State is going to show up for anything, this game is going to wind up being their bowl game, man, for Florida State. So if they like have any sense of like pride at all, I guess I would say they got to show up in this game because this is all they got left. They're hosting their big in-state rival. They're at home. It's senior day. The game doesn't mean as much to Florida. So I would look to take the points with Florida State in this one, as ugly as that sounds. Florida's up from 12.5 to 16.5, though, with 64% of tickets and 90% of the cash. So it looks like the cash, like the actual money is coming in on the Florida side. I just don't see it. I mean, I just think you're getting extra value on Florida State, and the total is low, too, sitting at 45.5. So, again, that's one where it looks like taking the points is more valuable when a total is that low like that. Excuse me. So, I would only look to that side there, and I forgot to look at what the total is in the Army game. It's 53.5 down from 54, so that one's not as low, but still, I mean, I'm playing that one, obviously, because I think it's a bad spot for Army. But, yeah, I think it's a bad spot for Florida. And up next is my final actual play. LSU -6. This is the last play. This is a classic for me, man. I mean, this has letdown written all over it for Oklahoma, man. Look at what Oklahoma just did last week. They beat Alabama, and they may have sent Alabama home out of the playoffs. Not only did they do that, they beat them embarrassingly, 24-3. This is like win of the year type of stuff after Oklahoma's had a bad season, man. They played some pretty good opponents in there, but they have not had a good season. I think they're better than their record would tell you that they are. Huge win of the season, and that win gave them bowl eligibility, and it was their senior day, and that was a win that kind of came from out of nowhere because Alabama was a double-digit favorite. They needed to keep winning. I mean, even if Oklahoma was to win that game, you would not think that it would be 24-3. That's just crazy. So now after that, what does Oklahoma have to really play for here? They just got bowl eligibility. That was win of the year material there. Massive win. And now they have to go play at night in Death Valley. Good luck with that to Oklahoma, even though I know Oklahoma does have the better defense. So they are the better defense getting points, but I think this has letdown written all over it. They're in letdown mode here. This is a letdown spot for them. LSU, I know their dreams have been crushed, and they're already bowl eligible as well. They're sitting at 7-4. They're not going to make, any other heights. They're not going to get into the SEC title game, but that reality has already set in. We saw it set in a while ago. It set in, and they lost to Florida, and they played well, and they bounced back from that, and they beat Vandy last week at home. So, again, LSU playing these night games at home, very difficult to beat them at home at night, even though I know Alabama went in there and beat the snot out of them in a night game at home. But still, LSU, Oklahoma is not Alabama, and I know Oklahoma just beat Alabama, but that's another thing. The public might come in and look at this and think, well, wait a minute. Alabama killed LSU at LSU. Oklahoma just beat Alabama. So doesn't that mean Oklahoma should be able to come within 6 against LSU? That might be what the public thinks. And I'm going to tell you, it doesn't work that way. Oklahoma, they're in the letdown spot. LSU, this win against Vandy, I think is good. Even though they were a 9.5 point favorite, they only won by 7. But they broke that loss streak. They actually played better in this game than the score looks. They outgained Vandy by well over 100 yards, almost 170 yards, more than doubled their first down output. They outpossessed them by almost 10 minutes. So it was kind of a dominant win for LSU, and it just didn't really show up on the scoreboard there. And this is their final home game, man. It's senior night for them, and their coach, Brian Kelly, it's Brian Kelly, right? I forget which Kelly is which now. I don't even remember. Whichever coach they have there, and I think it is him. His job is on the line, man, because LSU keeps kind of struggling and failing to meet the lofty expectations that they have. And if they lose this game, I think he's probably fucked. So they got to win this game for that reason, too. They got to win it for their coach. I think that win that halted their loss streak is going to be good. I think that this is going to be a game they're going to show up for because they want to win on senior night. 8-4 actually looks a lot better to finish the season than 7-5 when the coach's job is on the line. So they're going to be playing here. Oklahoma, they played their huge game last week, so I think it's over for them. Give me LSU. LSU, they're actually down from 6.5 to 6. They do have 67% of tickets, but 70% of the cash on them. So a little bit more of the cash than the tickets right now, but that's the last actual play that I have is LSU. And then finishing off the slate here, there are a few other big games here. Washington and Oregon. We know Oregon's a huge favorite here. They're at home. This game matters to Oregon, actually, because Oregon, of course, they're playing, for positioning here. They're going to be in the Big Ten title game already. I'm pretty sure it's just a matter of how that's going to play out as far as, who's going to host it. Or actually, I guess it'll be at a neutral site because it's one of the big I think these big conferences, it's always at a neutral site. But they're playing for playoff positioning as well. But not only that, but who was the team that ended Oregon's season last year? Oh, yeah, in the Pac-12 championship. And now both these teams are over in the Big Ten. But in the Pac-12 title game last year, Oregon was a 7 or 8 point favorite in that game. And they lost. They got upset by Washington. That was the second time that they lost to Washington last year because they lost to them barely during the regular season. They lost both games by 1 score. That was the game that eliminated Oregon from playoff contention. So Oregon, they're going to remember that. Washington was the team that ended their season last year, and this is obviously not anywhere close to the same Washington team as they were last year, but still Oregon, I think they're going to show up with a chip on their shoulder for that reason as well. And it's senior night for them, so it's double revenge plus elimination revenge from last year. I mean, Washington, yeah, they'll still probably show up as well. I mean, they have a chance to try to beat Oregon again, but I think both teams have reason to show up here, and when that happens, you tend to want to look to the better of the two teams. Both teams actually had a bye last week, too, which is weird. Both of these teams are coming out of byes. Washington, I mean, they're bowl eligible now at the very least. So they don't have a whole lot to look forward to, but this is still a big game that, like I said, they're still going to show up for this game. It is a big classic Pac-12 rivalry that's now over in the Big Ten. Oregon's down from 19.5 to 18, though. 82% of the tickets, 79% of the cash on the Oregon side. I mean, I don't know if I would agree with the market read on that. The market read is saying to take the points with Washington. I'm not quite so sure I agree with that for the reasons I just said. And then we got two more ranked matchups. The other two ranked matchups are right here at the end here. Texas and Texas A&M. This is a big game, man, between number 3 Texas and number 20 Texas A&M. Both these teams are sitting right near the top of the SEC. Texas is atop the SEC. Texas A&M, I think, needs this game a little bit more than Texas does because Texas, let's face it, they can take a second loss and they're still going to be in the playoff, and they may still be in the SEC championship game too, even if that happens. Texas A&M, although if Texas A&M does win this, they would be tied with Texas and leapfrog them because Texas A&M would have the tiebreaker against Texas. So I guess Texas still needs to show up in this game as well for those reasons, just for positioning as well. They don't want that to happen, but I think there is a possibility that they miss out on the SEC championship game if they lose. I don't think they're going to miss out on the playoff entirely. I think they're still going to get in. Texas A&M, though, if they lose and they take a fourth loss, there's no way. I mean, I don't know if they think they can make the playoff now. I mean, they're probably not going to. Excuse me. Out of these 3 lost teams, Alabama would be the one that may actually have a chance to still make the playoff field. Texas A&M, I think it can't happen, but this is still a big rivalry game, and they can play spoiler. Problem is, Texas A&M, they're coming off that 4 overtime game against Auburn. Like I said, so that game might have them gassed. Even though they are going to show up in this game, this is their final home game. It is a big game for them. Texas A&M does have a good defense, but so does Texas. So, I don't know, man. Like I said, after that game, Texas A&M, they might be real gassed after that. And then as far as Texas is concerned, what was I looking at? Oh, I was looking at Texas A&M. I wanted to look at Texas. Yeah, there's Texas. Texas had a much easier game against Kentucky in their last game. So Texas A&M is probably the team that is more fatigued coming into this one. Both teams kind of need to win this game for various reasons. So, although actually maybe arguably Texas needs this more because Texas A&M is probably out of it, whereas Texas is right in the hunt. So, all of that would kind of put me on the Texas side slightly in this one for those reasons, I guess. Because I think when it comes down to it, the motivation's a little bit stronger on their side, and they're the more rested team. I may also say that maybe this looks like kind of an under type of game with 2 really good defenses going at it here, but because Texas A&M played that 4 overtime game last week, I don't know that their defense is really going to be well rested enough here, so I would kind of lay off as far as that's concerned, but Texas is up from 4.5 to 5, 58% of the tickets, 56% of the cash, so tough market read there too, or it looks like they are a little bit public with less of the cash on them. Total up from 48 to 48.5, but 85% of the tickets and 75% of the cash on the over, so it looks like public is coming in on the over. It looks like a low total at 48.5, so the odds maker is kind of telling you they do also think this is going to be a lower scoring game. The only thing, like I said, that I would worry about a little bit is that Texas A&M, their defense might not be in a good position off of that real barn burner of a game against Auburn. So that's the only hesitation that I kind of have as far as maybe looking to an under in this one. Although, like I said, I tend to not play totals anyway, but I do have some reads that I try to throw out there on the totals. Other than that, yeah, this looks like it would be kind of one of those heavyweight, like, defensive battles there, though, so... Kansas State, Iowa State is the other ranked matchup. 2 of the ranked matchups are right near the end here. Kansas State, number 24. Iowa State, number 18. I mean, what do these two teams have to play for? I don't know exactly. I mean, I think Iowa State may have an outside chance of getting into the Big 12 title game. I'm not even sure if they still can. Kansas State, they cannot anymore, but this is this is actually Iowa State's final home game. Excuse me. So Kansas State, they had a stretch where they had at least one ugly loss in there against Houston. Arizona State, Arizona State's better than we probably thought they were at that point. And then Kansas State righted the ship, beating Cincinnati last week. Iowa State, they're coming off a couple wins against that same Cincinnati team and Utah, so they're on a nice win streak too. And this is at the very least their final home game. So this is a game, it's a tough read, man, where maybe Iowa State debatably is the slightly more motivated team here because it's their senior night, and maybe they have a shot, possibly if these other teams fall down, that maybe Iowa State could make the title game. But I think those other teams do play before they do as well. Iowa State's down from 3 to 2.5, 53% of the tickets and 75% of the cash on Kansas State, though. So the market read does look like it is on the Kansas State side with the cash kind of flowing in on that side. So, again, it's a game I don't want to get involved in. I don't know how to read it, really. Nevada and UNLV is a big Nevada rivalry game there between those two teams. It's a big rivalry. UNLV, they're just kind of cruising along. UNLV, what they're playing for still, I believe, is they're trying to get into the Mountain West championship game. And I don't know who has the tiebreaker, though, between them and Colorado State. So that's something to keep in mind. Colorado State already won today against Utah State, so that's something to actually look into. Like, can UNLV still even make the Mountain West Championship, or can they not? Because it depends on who has the tiebreaker now between them and Colorado State, and they didn't play each other this year, so I actually don't know who has the tiebreaker there, although UNLV, I think, is the better of the two teams, so it should be them getting to face Boise State there, but I'm not so sure. So that's something to actually look into if you're going to look into playing this game, because if UNLV can't make the Mountain West title game because of the Colorado State win, that's kind of brutal for them, and that might mean that they're not going to show up and play as hard in this game. And Nevada, they'll probably show up because they had that ugly loss to Air Force. I said that was a bad spot for them last week, even though I think they were coming out of a bye. They went into that bye on that really tough loss to Boise, where they kind of hung in that game against Boise, and then they had this big rivalry game against UNLV coming up, and they got caught against Air Force. So I think they're, at the very least, in kind of a bounce-back spot here. Let me see. No, I don't want to look at the source for the page, damn it. UNLV is a 17.5-point favorite, up to 17.5 with juice, 69% of the tickets, 76% of the cash on them. So the cash does look like it has come in on that side to a little bit of an extent, but I'm not sure I would agree with it. I would agree with it more if UNLV can indeed make the Mountain West Championships. That's something to look into. And Virginia Tech, this is a game where both teams, I think, are sitting at 5 wins. This is the big Virginia rival, and both teams are kind of rivalry, I should say. Both teams are kind of having down seasons. Virginia's coming off a real tough stretch. They played Clemson, Pitt, Notre Dame, SMU, some real tough opponents in there. And Virginia Tech maybe faced a slightly weaker schedule there down the stretch, but Virginia Tech is the better team still, and they are the favorite at 7, although it's down a little bit from 7 with heavier juice. 78% of tickets, 85% of the cash. I don't know how I would read that one either, but one of those teams is going to make a bowl, and one of those teams is going to be going home for the season, and it is Virginia Tech's senior night at the very least, but a big rivalry nonetheless. Marshall is having a tough game to finish their season, man, at James Madison. They're having to win all these tough games, man, here. Coastal's not really a pushover. Old Dominion's a pretty good defense. They're a tough team, and now they have to play a second straight road game at James Madison, and this is to get into the Sun Belt Championship, man, because if Marshall loses, that would open the door to Georgia Southern potentially being able to get in instead of them. But here's the thing. Georgia Southern, they play at 6 p.m., so if Georgia Southern is losing that game, the game's not going to be over, but if Georgia Southern looks like they're dead in that game, then you may see Marshall pack it in and not show up in this game, because Marshall would know they're going to be in the Sun Belt Championship at that point with the Georgia Southern loss. So it's kind of a weird scenario where sometimes it comes up in the NFL in that final week where one of the teams might be scoreboard watching. So that might be the case for Marshall, although the games are going to overlap, so maybe Georgia Southern's game will still be close and undecided at that point, and Marshall will have to show up. Maybe Marshall just won't give a shit and they'll just show up anyway. Just thinking, this is what we need to do. Forget about Georgia Southern. Just show up and just win this game against James Madison. James Madison, they're already in a bowl game. They lost to App State, which may kind of kill their momentum a little bit. But this is their senior night, so they still might show up for this one. But they can't make the Sun Belt Championship, and Marshall can. So Marshall may have a little bit of extra motivation for that reason. But JMU is up from 3.5 to 3.5 with juice. 74% of the tickets and 81% of the cash on them. So it looks like the market indicators are slightly on James Madison. And then the last game I'll talk about, BYU and Houston. The question here is BYU dream crushed now? Now that they've lost 2 games to Kansas and now Arizona State, BYU, I actually don't know, because the thing is, if Arizona State loses and BYU wins, BYU would actually still get into the Big 12 championship. So that's the one thing where BYU might still actually have reason to show up in this game, because I still think which team gets into the Big 12 championship, I think, is still undecided to that extent. So they may actually have reason to show up, and it is senior night, but I don't think that would be enough motivation on its own. But if they can still make the Big 12 title game, it is. But because this is a late game, maybe those other games will actually be decided by them, because Arizona State is playing at 3:30. So you'll have to see if Arizona State wins that game against Arizona. BYU is then probably going to be a dead team, and then you might want to look to maybe take Houston. But then the problem is, I think if that happens, you might see this line start moving towards Houston a little bit in this game, because that would basically be the dream crusher for BYU, because they can't make the playoff at this point unless they win. Unless they win the Big 12 championship. So that's their only path now. And if that goes away just because Arizona State wins, they're probably going to be in the dream crusher in Houston. I mean, they don't have anything left to play for, though, other than they get to step up and face BYU and maybe completely dream crush them and finish them off, basically. BYU's up from 11.5 to 13 right now, though, but public with 85% of the tickets and 62% of the cash. So the public still liking BYU here because of what they've done over the course of the season. And Houston really has not done much other than suck. So that's how all of that goes. And I think that's going to do it, man. Long video for me. Final week here, rivalry week, final week of the season. Long video, hour and a half. Once again, my college football plays for Saturday are UL-Monroe +10, UTSA +7, Michigan State -1.5, Western Kentucky +1, and LSU -6. And that's going to do it for me. I'm Tower Gang Toad. You can follow me on Twitter. I'll be back in the morning, unfortunately, with no voice. Probably having to break down whatever's going on tomorrow. All this college basketball, NBA, NHL, I guess. College basketball is a real headache, but hopefully we're getting into that point where there's like a lull in the college basketball. But I don't know, man. The calm before the conference before conference play starts, before the conference play storm. I don't know. Go follow the Tower Gang podcast, patreon.com/Tower Gang, and throw us some support. And you get live pre-show, post-show. You get to watch them after the fact, too. Hang out with us in Telegram. Submit to the mailbag. Chat with us in there. And that's going to do it for me, man. Thanks for hanging out, everybody. Oh, yeah, Game Center. Yeah, you've been using that since then. Nate, thanks for hanging out, my man. That's going to do it for me. All you guys who've been in the chat, and continue to be in the chat. I don't know why you keep doing it, but I like that you like what I'm throwing down on the show, man. So thanks, guys. And let's have a good one. Maybe you'll actually get some sleep now. Peace out. Oh, and before I get out of here, actually follow flapper.net as well, flappr.net, the finest smut blog in the world. And I am running the betting odds for the Milkers of the Year, which I do have to release an update to that again, probably, I guess, at the start of the month. Maybe I got to do it. I don't even know. No real schedule there, but they post about beautiful women, politics to some extent, history, humor, and football. And they do like weekly NFL breakdowns as well, or recaps as well, that are always hilarious. So check those guys out too. That's going to do it. Have a good night, everybody. Tower Gang, baby. Peace out.